next thing I want to mention from your book is your detailed analysis of reason and Christianity. I have to tell you, this is my favorite topic in your book. Why do Christians object to questioning and critical analysis of their object of worship, the Bible? And you also talk about how Martin Luther has regarded reason as a threat to faith. Why do you think they're afraid of reason? Is that what it is? Are they afraid? And why so?
I believe it is. I believe that there is fear. And I can see a few different types of fear that underlie Christianity. One point I want to clarify, you just mentioned the Bible as the object of worship. Actually, no. They don't, well, Christians do not worship the Bible. They don't bow down and chant, "Oh, Holy Bible, we worship thee." No, I see many sources of fear that drive Christianity. One is, of course, the fear of death. They want eternal life. I think when I was younger, much younger, I probably had some kind of fear of death. I'm an old man now. I don't know how much longer I have, but I have no fear of it now. In fact, the notion of eternal life is appalling. It just strikes me as appalling. But there's fear of death. I think another fear is uncertainty. There are people who cannot abide uncertainty. They want to be absolutely sure. And by using the Bible and Christian doctrine as a kind of a script that they can follow in life, that tells them what their beliefs should be, what the things they should say, the things they should do and not do, they get a sense of certainty. They're on a tried and true and proven path. And they don't have to worry, because uncertainty means, by definition, you don't know for sure. And they want to know for sure. And that leads to the third basis of fear. Christian doctrine deals not only with salvation, but with damnation. And they have terrified themselves with their own fantasies about hell. They have put in every nightmarish notion that could occur to a human being and made a place where all that happens to the bad people. And that vision is so terrifying that they cannot abide, they cannot tolerate any uncertainty about their own salvation. They have to be absolutely sure. Now, a non-believer looks at the Bible, looks at church doctrine, and says, well, there's no proof of any of that, and it doesn't make any sense. Well, the no proof doesn't bother me personally, but the fact that it's self-contradictory, the doctrines are self-contradictory, that's what bothered me. That's why I wrote the book. So reason, looking with a critical eye at the Bible and its inconsistencies and its blasphemies. And by the way, I don't dismiss the Bible entirely. I think there are some wonderful passages in it. But it is, after all, just an ancient book, a compendium of the hopes and hatreds and fears and fantasies of men from that era of history. But to look with a critical eye at the sacred book and at church doctrine and say, well, no, that's got to be wrong. That just can't be right. It's just wrong. That is very scary to Christians, and so they react vehemently, sometimes violently, against that. And it's notable to me that there's far more hostility among Christians toward atheists than towards members of other religions, because to Christians, members of other religions have made a mistake simply in which sacred book they've chosen. But they basically are on the path of, yes, we have to follow a book. Yes, we have to go with God. Yes, and so on. They just chose the wrong sacred book. But an atheist is a far greater threat because an atheist says, none of these books are the word of God. They're all just human documents. There's no proof of anything. And that is intolerable.
Right. It is fear psychosis, basically. That's what is operating. That is the reason they do not even venture out to critically analyze their beliefs. Although in Isaiah, the biblical God, in the book of Isaiah in the Hebrew scriptures, which is the Old Testament, the biblical God invites man to come and reason with him.
Yes, the Hebrew scriptures certainly value reason, at least more so than the Greek scriptures. But the hostility to reason was really more of a church invention, a development within the church, not so much within the sacred book, the Bible itself. And you identified correctly that Martin Luther was particularly distrustful of reason, regarding it as a substantial threat to faith in the Bible and faith in church doctrine. And that hostility to reason has persisted in all the centuries since his time.
Right. And at another place in the book, you said Christian proselytizers and apologists use faux rationality to gain converts and reassure believers. So are you saying that apologists like Ravi Zacharias, William Lane Craig's use of syllogisms is faux rationality?
Faux rationality, yes, I find it so. I find that their explanations and reasons are false. They are not tenable. Now, Zacharias is, I think, in some circles regarded as just as a con man. Some people, believe in him very fiercely, but he does have something of a reputation of a con man. William Lane Craig is an academician who's most famous for his book Reasonable Faith, in which he presents the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God. Now, my main focus is that doctrinal Christianity, not just belief that Jesus was someone special, however special is defined, but church doctrine on sin and salvation, that kind of Christianity. My focus is on the problems in doctrinal Christianity, not on does God exist or not exist. There's no proof, obviously. In arguing over the centuries, in arguing for the existence of God, there are basically two kinds of arguments. There's evidence-based arguments and ontological arguments. Evidence is you looking at certain objective things that we can all agree upon and measure and say, yes, these point to God. And ontological arguments are used when there is no evidence, in which you say, well, there's no evidence, but if you think about this and this, there is a logical necessity for God to exist. And so the Kalam argument is an ontological argument. It says God must exist. It's in the category of first cause arguments. The usual summary of the Kalam argument is that the universe has a finite age. Scientists agree that it's about 14 point something billion years old. And so it has a beginning. And so the argument starts with the universe began to exist. Things that begin to exist must have a cause. Therefore, there must have been an uncreated first cause that brought the universe about. That's the gist of the argument in three statements. My objections to it are first linguistic. Begin to exist is just a silly phrase. We use the word begin to describe actions. I begin to work. I begin to play music. I begin to write something. Actions. But existence is not an action. So begin to exist is kind of silly. But in any case, the reason why the Kalam argument is flawed, why it doesn't prove anything, in my view, is that there are tenable, believable models of the universe being explored by physicists, cosmologists with the highest academic credentials, a notion of existence as eternal. That existence doesn't begin. Not just the universe began, but existence doesn't begin. There is always existence. Existence just is. So then what about the universe with its finite age of 14 billion years? And so these models are of an eternal cycle of universes, an infinitude of universes, each one arising, ending, and giving rise to the next one. So we happen to be in a universe that is currently 14 billion years old, but it's just one of an infinitude of universes in an eternal chain that has no beginning, no end, and therefore no need for a creator. Now, they're not saying that this model has been proven true. That's not the point. The point is that it is possible. It is being explored seriously. It's not a fanciful lunatic idea in physics. It is a plausible model. And if it's plausible, that means it could be. And if it could be, then the Kalam argument that God must exist is false. God is not required if these models are true, and these models may be true. The other objection that I have to the Kalam argument, and to all first cause arguments, is that, and this is kind of funny to me, is that if God is eternal, and that at some point God decided to create the universe, whether it was 6,000 years ago or 14 billion years ago, but if God is eternal, that means that God was literally nowhere, floating alone in nothingness for eternity, until such time as he decided to bring the universe, the physical universe, into existence. What was God doing for eternity, forever, floating forever in nothingness, all alone?
Right. It doesn't make sense. Then those questions arise like, how do you define the state of nothingness of the universe? Now, what is nothingness?
It doesn't exist. I believe that existence, the antithesis of nothingness is not the universe. It's existence. Existence just is. And if existence is, there is no such thing as nothingness. And now I should mention that when apologists offer these kinds of arguments for the existence of God, for the validity of church doctrine, their main audience is not skeptics. Their main audience is believers who want to be reassured. So in a sense, they have an easy audience. They want to believe, and apologists just help them to believe. So, in other words, maybe a Christian believer has a question, has some doubt, has some uncertainty. The apologist reassures that person, and that person is grateful to be reassured. So they are far more successful with their main audience of believers than they are with non-believers who bring a skeptical mind to these questions. And I also should mention that I don't want to characterize all Christians as driven by fear. I think that that's true of many Christians, probably the majority, especially those who embrace doctrinal Christianity. There are individuals whose experience of Christianity is very different. Jesus as a moral teacher, as a spiritual individual who imbues the world with love, with a desire to help others. And their sense of Christianity is much closer to what I call spirituality, which I describe in the final section of my book.
Yeah, I have to tell you that that kind of Christian has a name in India. He is called liberal Christian. That kind of Christian is not a true Christian in the true sense.
Well, whether it's a true Christian or not, that gets into the logical fallacy called the true Scotsman.
Right.
A fallacious way of thinking that if somebody identifies as a Christian, but then does something that other Christians don't like, they will say, oh, well, that person wasn't a true Christian.
Right.
But that's just silly.
Now, history equates unquestioned obedience to Christian doctrines as darkness and questioning them as enlightenment. Do you agree with that statement? What I mean is, if you read European history, the Dark Ages is the name given to the centuries when people were tortured and killed for questioning the church and its dogmatic teachings. And then Europe arrives into the age of enlightenment, where reason woke up from a deep slumber and questioning and scrutinizing of matters of faith became commonplace.
Yes, correct. The hostility to reason lasted longer than the Dark Ages. Historically, the Dark Ages refers to the period after the fall of the Roman Empire,
Correct.
when the European continent was essentially in a state of chaos. But as nation states stabilized and the church made inroads spreading throughout Europe, we no longer call that the Dark Ages, but that is the Middle Ages. It is still prior to the Age of Enlightenment, absolutely. But the hostility to reason, the demand for unquestioned obedience to the church and its teachings, that persisted, yes, up basically until the time of the Enlightenment.
So, in summary, when you look at the bigger picture, what we have is Dark Ages equals to unquestioned obedience to church, and enlightenment equals to critical thinking and liberty to question.
Yes, and the Middle Ages kind of go with the Dark Ages. Yeah, it's all pre-Enlightenment. Yes.
The Middle Ages, I would look at it as a time when people were shedding the fear of dying for expressing the questions that were bubbling in their minds. So the Middle Ages was a kind of transitioning of man from fear to freedom from fear.
I'm not enough of a historian to know, I really am not, to know what the changing attitudes during the Middle Ages was. I know that the church, the Roman Catholic Church, and then as the Protestant Reformation took steam, that's pre-Enlightenment, to be sure, and they were fiercely hostile towards questioning doctrine. the Roman Catholic Church didn't worry about the Bible because the members of the church, when the Roman Catholic Church was the only Christian church, Roman Catholic Church, the Eastern Church, they had a schism, but basically the Bible was not in the hands of most believers. It was in the hands of the clergy, and they told the members of their religions, their followers, that this is what you must believe. But they were fiercely hostile to heresy. Heresy is a grave church crime, which the Western Church, the Roman Catholic Church, punished by death.
Mm-hmm.
Heresy means questioning or rejecting church dogma. And dogma, just to define terms clearly, dogma is the particular doctrines or teachings of the church that are considered absolutely essential that may not be questioned. Mm-hmm. Hence, we have the term dogmatism, to refuse to question. Then, with the emergence of the Reformed Church taking form as Lutheranism and Calvinism, there is not only the fierce dedication to church doctrine, but also to the literal words of the Bible. And the early Protestants were just as ruthless and murderous as the Roman Catholic Church had been in terms of dealing with heresy. But gradually, there were questions did start to emerge, yes.
And you also confirm in the book that religious doctrine derived from a book held sacred and thus shielding from challenge can be even especially dangerous.
Extremely dangerous, because if you consider how murderous political doctrine can be, when in the 20th century, looking at the mass murders committed in the name of politics that we see in the Stalinist era and Pol Pot in Cambodia, that's bad enough. But religious doctrine that preaches warfare against unbelievers is far more dangerous, because it not only is wrong, it is wrong in the eyes of God, not just wrong in the eyes of the political leader, but wrong in the eyes of God. To defy church doctrine, to question the Bible, is to be the worst of criminals, not just a traitor to the state, but an enemy of God.
Enemy of church, right? Anybody who questions was the enemy of the church, and church was the representative of God.
The right. Church appointed itself God's spokesperson, the proclaimer of doctrine, the defender of doctrine, and the guardians of the sole path to salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And right. When people were terrified of the threats of damnation, they flocked to the church because they didn't want to go to hell. They wanted to be saved. So it was a very strong kind of appeal.
Right. And then you also said that the church as an institution wants its members to be docile, as seen in referring to the congregation as a flock. Their message is crystal clear. Believe us and you will be saved. Doubt us and question us, you will go to hell.
That's exactly right. They will not say those words, but that is what the words mean. They will say you must believe in God, you must believe in salvation through Jesus, but what it all comes down to is you must believe what we tell you about God, what we tell you about salvation through Jesus.
Right. It is not so much as believe in God as it is believe in what we tell you about God.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely correct. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are so many different aspects of Christianity that you have covered in your book. And it is written in such a concise manner that even a person uninformed of Christian theology can understand those concepts with ease. So often, we as former Christians tend to normalize such terms as dogma, salvation, redemption, adoption, not realizing that those terms barely mean anything to a non Christian. But when you read the book, it seemed like you stepped into the shoes of an uninformed non Christian and broke down every term. Makes me ask if you had any training in Christian writing or writing per se.
Oh, yes. I'm retired now, but I spent my career as a professional writer for the medical literature. I wrote scientific reports and reviews for medical journals. I did that for over 33 years. So I was accustomed to thinking analytically about the material that I'm presenting, which was often complex and technical, and determining the clearest way to present those concepts. And they had to make sense. And it had to be comprehensible. Even though I was writing for a professional audience that understands everything, the job of a medical writer, such as the work that I did, was so that even the professional audience, very smart, very well educated people, would never be left puzzled. They said, well, wait a minute, I thought he said this, but then later he said that. You should never leave the reader with that kind of confusion. It should all make sense, step by step, logically presented. And so having done that for so many years was excellent training, let's say for me, preparation for
Sure,
writing
it comes out in your book.
for writing a book like this. And I have to say that in writing the book, I had to do some research. I'm not a scholar. I want to emphasize that. I have no formal training in theology whatsoever. Absolutely none. I attended adult Bible school in churches, which was kind of worthless. Most of what I've learned through research, kind of casual research on my own, things I've read, things I've talked about with people. So I don't present myself as a scholar, just as a rational thinker.
Right, right.
And I wished when I was writing the book, I wished that a book like this had been written by a scholar, because that's the person who should have written this book, is a real scholar.
So you wrote medical journals. Are you a medical doctor?
No, I was trained as a physician's assistant, a PA. In America, that's a profession that is called a mid-level practitioner. It is, we trained in the same topic areas as doctors, physicians are trained, but the training period is much shorter, and we're not as qualified to treat everything as a licensed physician is. But physician's assistants can treat a lot of routine things that take up much of a doctor's time. And that makes for more efficient use of the doctor's time. But after 2 years of practice as a PA, I realized I just really wasn't talented at this. I could never really be first rate at it. And I had already gotten some experience as a writer when I was a student. The director of the PA program that I attended as a student was friends with someone who published a very small set of medical journals, and I earned a little money editing them. So between my experience editing articles for those journals and the fact that I was very much at home with the scientific aspects of clinical medicine, physiology in particular. I eventually left clinical practice after a couple of years because I thought, well, rather than be a so-so mediocre clinician, I'd rather be a first-rate writer, which is how I then spent the remainder of my profession in the next 33 years. I did teach physiology for a while in a PA training program, but it was that experience as a writer, which, as I mentioned, was kind of a good background that I brought to writing Doctrine Impossible because of the need to think logically, step by step, and make the case plausible and accessible to the reader.
I like how you put it. You chose to be an A-grade medical writer instead of being a mediocre clinician or a physician's assistant. Now that tells me about your drive to reach the greatest heights in whatever you undertake. That's really impressive.
Sure.